License and registration, please. Do you know why I pulled you over? Sir, I need your license and registration. Can you hear me?
You shouldn't have stopped me, officer.
Oh my God, what's this? This is scary. Back up, back. Stay there.
Officer David Chen's body camera was recording just another routine night on the empty road in Navajo County when his headlights illuminated something that would make him question everything he thought he knew about reality. It was 1:30 in the morning on a freezing Tuesday in October when he spotted the pink pickup truck parked alone on the shoulder of Route 491, that road known for stories most people prefer not to believe. What happened in the next 18 minutes was captured in high definition by the body cam attached to the officer's chest, and the footage would become the most disturbing ever leaked from a police database. Before we continue, where are you watching this from right now? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button because what I'm about to show you goes far beyond what you imagine is possible, and you won't want to miss the details that turn this video into the most discussed evidence among paranormal investigators and police officers. Throughout the American Southwest, David Chen was 32 years old with 7 years of highway patrol experience. He had seen fatal accidents, high-speed chases, drunk drivers, armed traffickers. Nothing he'd experienced on those roads prepared him for what he was about to encounter in that pink pickup truck stopped in the middle of nowhere. Route 491 cuts through Navajo territory and has a reputation that makes local drivers avoid passing through there after dark. The elders in the region call that road the Path of Restless Spirits and tell stories about creatures that shouldn't exist, beings that can mimic human form but carry something deeply wrong in their eyes and movements. Chen didn't believe any of those stories. He was a man of facts, procedures, protocols. When he saw the pickup truck stopped on the shoulder with headlights still on, he assumed it would just be another driver with mechanical problems or someone who stopped to answer their phone. He radioed in his position, turned on the patrol car's emergency lights, and approached slowly from the rear of the vehicle. The body cam captured the exact moment he stepped out of the patrol car, the sound of his boots on the dry dirt of the shoulder, his calm breathing as he walked toward the driver's window. What the camera recorded next would make anyone watching feel an impossible to ignore chill. Sitting behind the wheel of the pickup truck was a figure wearing a black cowboy hat and a faded jean jacket. But there was something completely wrong with that person. The way the head was positioned, slightly tilted at an angle that seemed too uncomfortable for a human being to maintain. The absolute stillness, no blinking, no visible breathing, none of the small involuntary movements every human body makes. And then there were the eyes, or what should have been eyes, reflecting the light from Chen's flashlight in a way that wasn't normal, wasn't natural, wasn't anything that made sense. Chen stopped, about 10 feet from the window. His hand instinctively went to the gun in his holster, but he didn't draw it yet. He said the standard approach words, asking if everything was okay, requesting license and registration. The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just kept staring forward through the windshield as if Chen didn't exist there. The officer repeated the questions, now with a firmer, louder voice. That's when the first movement happened, and this movement was captured frame by the body cam. The figure's head began to turn toward Chen, but it turned in a way that made the officer take an instinctive step back, because that movement didn't follow the normal anatomy of a human neck. Have you ever seen something with your own eyes that made your brain refuse to process what you were seeing? Something that simply shouldn't be possible, but was happening right in front of you? That's exactly what was recorded on that body cam. The figure's mouth opened, but what came out wasn't a normal human voice. It was something that sounded like multiple voices at once, some high-pitched, others deep, all overlapping, saying words Chen couldn't fully understand, but that made every hair on his body stand on end. He drew his weapon at that moment, shouting commands for the figure to show its hands, exit the vehicle, but the creature, because at that moment Chen knew he wasn't dealing with a human being, simply continued staring at him with those eyes that reflected light, like those of a wild animal caught by headlights on the road. What happened in the following seconds broke every training protocol Chen had learned at the academy. The figure inside the pickup truck began to move, but not the way a human body moves. Imagine someone trying to imitate human movements for the first time, as if learning to use a body that wasn't theirs, each gesture mechanical and wrong. The shoulders contracted at strange angles as that thing tried to reach the door handle from the inside. Chen shouted commands increasingly louder, his voice betraying the first real sign of fear he probably had never felt in an approach before. The body cam captured everything, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand holding the gun, the breathing that got faster, the step back he took when the pickup truck door began to open slowly. The creature exited the vehicle in a fluid but disturbingly wrong movement, as if gravity worked differently for it. It was tall, taller than it seemed when sitting, maybe about 6'10", with limbs that seemed too long for normal human proportions. The cowboy hat still partially covered the face, but now Chen could see better, and what he saw made his military training from years ago kick in. He shouted for the creature to stay still, hands up, but it kept advancing slowly, feet dragging on the ground in a way that didn't make normal footstep sounds, more like something was sliding than walking. That's when Chen activated the emergency radio, his voice now clearly altered by panic, requesting immediate backup and describing something the dispatcher on the other end probably thought was a joke or a prank. Chen was trained to deal with human threats, with violent people, with real danger situations. But this was different because every primitive instinct in his brain was screaming that this wasn't human, that this was something his most ancient ancestors knew and feared, something that remained buried in humanity's collective memory as a warning never to be forgotten. The creature stopped, about 15 feet from him, and that's when Chen managed to see the full face for the first time under his flashlight. There was no way to adequately describe what the camera captured at that moment without sounding completely insane, but the images don't lie. The skin had a wrong texture, like some kind of poorly fitted mask over something that didn't have the correct bone structure underneath. The eyes were the worst because they had pupils, but these pupils weren't round. They were vertical like a reptile's, and reflected light with a yellowish glow that no human eye could ever produce. Then the thing spoke again, but this time the words were clearer, though they still sounded like they came from multiple throats at once. It said something in a language Chen didn't recognize, words that seemed ancient, predating any modern language. The body cam managed to capture the audio clearly enough for linguists and Native American language experts to analyze it later, and what they discovered was disturbing for completely different reasons. Some identified fragments of archaic Navajo, others swore they heard elements of languages that shouldn't even exist anymore for centuries. But what everyone agreed on was that it was saying something about walking between worlds and using borrowed skins, phrases that made direct reference to the oldest legends about skinwalkers that the Navajo tell only in whispers and never near open windows at night. Chen was frozen, his gun still pointed but his hand visibly shaking now. Part of him, the rational part trained to assess threats, was trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was someone under the influence of hallucinogenic drugs. Maybe it was some kind of bizarre artistic performance. Maybe his own eyes were betraying him in the dark. But the other part of him, the part that comes from millions of years of human evolution, surviving predators and dangers, knew with absolute certainty that he was face to face with something that hunted human beings, something that saw him not as a police officer with a gun, but as potential prey. The creature took another step toward him, and that's when Chen finally fired a warning shot into the ground between them, the blast of the gun echoing through the empty road. What happened next made Chen completely doubt his sanity. The creature wasn't startled by the sound of the shot. Instead, it tilted its head to the side again, but this time so far that the neck formed an angle that would have broken human vertebrae. And then it began to make a sound that the body cam described as laughter, but it wasn't human laughter. It was something between an animal whimper and hysterical laughter, rising and falling in frequencies that made the recording slightly distort. Chen fired another warning shot, shouting for the thing to stop, back up, lie on the ground. None of this had any effect. The creature simply continued standing there, that horrible laughter coming from its throat, eyes fixed on Chen with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the camera and reach anyone watching the recording later. That's when Chen heard a sound behind him, coming from the direction of his own patrol car, and realized with growing horror that maybe that thing in the pickup truck wasn't alone on that road. Chen spun his body abruptly, keeping his weapon raised, dividing his attention between the creature in front of him and whatever was moving near his patrol car. The body cam captured the exact moment he saw a second figure crouch beside the patrol car. But this one was on all fours like an animal, spine arched in a way no human spine should arch. This second creature was wearing what looked like torn human clothes, but the shape underneath was even more distorted than the first. Chen was now in a position every police officer fears, surrounded by threats coming from multiple directions. No backup in sight, and worse still, unsure if his weapons would have any real effect against whatever these things were. He slowly backed toward the side of the road, trying to keep both creatures in his field of vision, his heart beating so hard that the Bodycam microphone was picking up the accelerated pulse. The second creature began moving in circles around the patrol car, its movements resembling a predator studying its prey before the final attack. It didn't have the cowboy hat like the first one, and its face was even more exposed to the camera lights. What Chen saw made his stomach turn, because that face had human features mixed with something completely other, as if someone had taken a human face and stretched it over a skull that had the wrong shape, eyes positioned a bit farther apart than they should be, mouth too wide and full of teeth that seemed too pointed under thin lips. This creature began making a sound that the Bodycam registered as a type of call, long oscillating notes that echoed through the night and made Chen's skin crawl completely. That's when Chen noticed something that made the entire situation even worse, if that was possible. The first creature, the one that had exited the pickup truck, was changing. Its form was altering right there in front of him, limbs getting even longer, torso bending forward, jaw distending in a way that produced a bone-cracking sound audible in the recording. The cowboy hat fell to the ground, revealing a skull that had human hair, but a shape that was definitely not human, too elongated, with protrusions suggesting horns or something similar beginning to emerge from the skin. Chen shouted into the radio again, his voice now breaking completely, begging for someone to respond, for backup to arrive, for someone to believe what he was seeing. The dispatcher finally responded, saying the nearest unit was 15 minutes away, and Chen knew he didn't have 15 minutes. The creature near the patrol car suddenly lunged forward with impossible speed, crossing the distance between it and Chen in less than 2 seconds. The officer fired 3 shots in rapid succession, the sound of detonations piercing the silent night. The Bodycam showed the impacts hitting the creature's torso, but instead of falling or backing up, it only staggered slightly and continued advancing. Chen could clearly see through the camera that there was blood, but this blood was too dark, almost black under the lights, and the creature didn't seem to feel pain the way any living being should feel when hit by 9mm caliber bullets. It was now only 10 feet from him, its yellow eyes fixed, that distorted face opening into something that could have been a smile if it had happened on a normal human face. Chen made the only decision that made sense in that moment of pure terror. He ran. The Bodycam captured the next few minutes in a chaotic and shaky view as he sprinted along the side of the road, jumping over low bushes, his feet hitting the hard ground as he ran faster than he had run in his entire life. The audio of the recording was a mix of his panting breath, the sound of branches breaking under his feet, and behind it all, those horrible calls the creatures made, sounds that seemed to be getting closer despite Chen running with all his strength. He looked back once, and the camera briefly captured the two. Figures following him, but they weren't running the way humans run. They were moving in long, fluid leaps that covered distance unnaturally, as if normal physics didn't apply to them. Chen tripped on a rock and fell face first to the ground, the Bodycam recording a second of complete darkness when he hit the dirt. When the camera stabilized again, he was on his back looking up, and the two creatures were standing over him, dark silhouettes against the starry sky. This should have been the last thing the Bodycam recorded, the final moment before Chen became another missing person in Route 491 statistics. But then something happened that no one, not Chen, not the investigators who would analyze this recording later, could explain. An extremely bright light illuminated the entire area, so intense that the camera had to automatically adjust the exposure. The creatures immediately backed away, making those whimpering sounds again. But this time, there was fear in those sounds. Something Chen recognized even through the panic consuming him. The light came from above, as if a giant spotlight had been turned on in the sky, but there was no helicopter, no engine sound, just that white, intense luminosity that turned night into artificial day. Chen managed to get up staggering, his hand still clutching the gun, eyes trying to adjust to the sudden brightness. The two creatures had retreated to the shadows at the edges of the road, their bodies contorting in ways the Bodycam could barely capture, because they seemed to be dissolving and reforming at the same time, as if that light was causing them physical pain or forcing their forms to destabilize. The sounds they made now were high-pitched and desperate, screams that made the recording's audio completely distort in some points because the frequency was beyond what the equipment could adequately process. Chen took advantage of that moment to run back toward his patrol car, stumbling but staying on his feet, his mind still trying to process where that light had come from and why. The creatures feared it so much. The body cam showed the ground illuminated as if it were noon, every rock and every bush casting sharp shadows in all directions because of the light source directly above. He reached the patrol car and threw himself inside, locking the doors with trembling hands, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he tried to catch his breath. Through the windshield, he could see the pink pickup truck still parked on the shoulder, and beyond it, in the shadows the intense light created, the shapes of the two creatures moving erratically, like wounded animals trying to find an escape route. But it was when Chen looked up through the patrol car's roof that the body cam captured something that would transform this case from an encounter with possible skinwalkers into something much more complex and disturbing. There was something in the sky, a shape that blocked the stars, something too large to be a plane or helicopter, something that seemed to be hovering completely, motionless while that light emanated from its lower surface. The camera couldn't capture clear details because of the intense brightness, but the silhouette was unmistakable, an object of triangular or disc shape, without any features that corresponded to any known aircraft. Chen sat there, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing, because now he wasn't just dealing with creatures that shouldn't exist, but also with something in the sky that defied all logic and understanding. The light remained for another 43 seconds, each second captured by the body cam, with that blinding glow that made everything seem overexposed and unreal. During this time, the creatures continued retreating in the shadows, their movements becoming increasingly frantic and desperate. Chen could hear more of those calls, but now they sounded different, almost as if the things were communicating with each other, coordinating some kind of retreat. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the light went out. Darkness returned instantly, and it took several seconds for the camera to adjust again, showing only the normal night illuminated by the headlights of the patrol car and pickup truck. The object in the sky had completely disappeared. No engine sound moving away. No light trail. Simply vanished as if it had never been there. Chen remained inside the patrol car for a full 5 more minutes, his breathing gradually returning to normal, his eyes scanning the surrounding darkness, looking for any sign of the creatures. The body cam continued recording, capturing the heavy silence that had fallen over that part of the road, a silence that seemed wrong after all the chaos of the previous minutes. He finally managed to use the radio again, his voice still shaky but more controlled, informing the dispatcher that he was safe, but that he needed that backup immediately, that something had happened that he couldn't explain over radio. The dispatcher confirmed that 2 units were now less. Then 5 minutes away, and Chen decided to remain locked inside the patrol car until they arrived, his eyes never stopping watching the pink pickup truck and the dark areas around. When backup finally arrived, 2 patrol cars approaching with emergency lights flashing and illuminating the entire area, Chen exited the car with legs that still trembled slightly. The 2 officers who responded to the call were veterans, people Chen had known for years, and he could see in their faces the mixture of concern and confusion as they listened to his attempt to explain what had happened. The body cam captured that entire conversation, Chen gesturing toward the pickup truck, to the location where the creatures were, to the sky where that impossible light had appeared. The other officers listened with expressions that changed between skepticism and genuine concern for Chen's mental state, because what he was describing simply didn't make sense to people who hadn't seen the recording, who hadn't experienced those moments of pure terror that were still fresh in his mind. The 3 officers approached the pink pickup truck with extreme caution, their weapons drawn and flashlights scanning every inch around the vehicle. Chen's body cam continued recording as he led the approach, his body still tense with residual adrenaline, each shadow making his heart race again. When they got close enough to look inside the cabin through the windows, they found something none of them expected. The interior of the pickup truck was completely empty, but there were strange marks on the seats, deep scratches in the leather upholstery that appeared to have been made by claws, and a smell that all 3 officers later described as something between rotting meat and burning sulfur, an odor so strong it made one of the veterans turn his face and cough. There were also stains of that dark, almost black liquid on the seats and steering wheel, presumably the blood of the creature Chen had shot. And when they tried to open the door, they discovered the internal handles were damaged, as if they had been ripped off or broken with brute force from the inside out. What they found in the glove compartment was even more disturbing. There were vehicle registration documents in the name of a woman called Sarah Whitehorse, resident of Shiprock in New Mexico. But along with these documents, there were old Polaroid photographs showing people none of the officers recognized. And behind each photo was written in faded red ink words in Navajo that none of them could read. One of the veterans, an officer named Marcus Begay, who had Navajo ancestry, looked at the photos and his expression immediately changed to something between fear and deep discomfort. He told the others that these weren't just ordinary photos, that there were symbols written there that his grandmother used to warn him never to pronounce aloud. Symbols associated with Navajo witchcraft and practices that were considered absolute taboo, even to mention. Marcus suggested they shouldn't touch anything else inside that pickup truck without proper gloves, and that maybe it was better to call someone who understood more about these specific cultural matters. Chen then asked to search the area around the road where he had run and where the creatures had chased him. What the flashlight beams revealed made all three officers stop mid-step and look at each other with expressions of genuine disbelief. There were footprints in the dry ground, but these footprints weren't from human shoes or even bare human feet. They were impressions that seemed to start as human feet but then transformed into something more like hooves or claws, as if the creature had changed shape while running, the transition captured in the marks left in the dirt. Some of the footprints showed only 3 long toes with deep claw marks embedded in the ground. Others showed shapes that didn't correspond to any known animal in the region. Marcus took photographs of each mark, measuring them carefully and documenting the patterns, his expression becoming increasingly serious as he worked. Then they found the blood. Not just drops, but significant stains spread over the rocks and bushes where Chen had fired at the second creature. One of the veterans collected samples using a basic kit they had in the patrol car. But when the flashlight illuminated the liquid more closely, everyone could see it didn't look like normal blood. It was too thick, almost with the consistency of motor oil, and had that deep black color that didn't reflect light the way human or animal blood should reflect. Worse still, the blood seemed to be moving slowly over the rock, as if it still had some kind of life of its own, small threads of it extending and retracting, in a way that made Marcus take a large step back and make the sign of the cross, something Chen had never seen the officer do before in the 7 years they'd worked together. The search continued through the surrounding area, but the creatures had completely disappeared, as if they had dissolved into the air, along with that mysterious light from the sky. There were no blood trails beyond the first 150 feet, no footprints continuing beyond the immediate area, nothing indicating where they had gone or if they simply ceased to exist when that light appeared. Chen showed the other officers the exact spot where he had looked up and seen that object in the sky, and Marcus admitted he had received unofficial reports over the years from other officers who claimed to have seen strange lights in that part of Route 491. Lights that appeared and disappeared without explanation, but that most chose not to officially report for fear of being ridiculed or considered unstable for work. The Bodycam captured that entire conversation, each word spoken in low tones, as if the 3 men were afraid that something might still be listening in the surrounding shadows. When they finally returned to the patrol cars, it was almost 3 in the morning. Chen was still visibly shaken, his hands trembling when he tried to write the initial incident report. The other 2 officers exchanged significant looks, clearly uncertain about how to proceed, because what they had witnessed that night, the impossible footprints, the strange blood, the photographs with witchcraft symbols, all of this corroborated the insane story Chen had told, but still seemed too absurd to put in an official report that would be read by superiors and potentially by public prosecutors. Marcus finally suggested they should report the incident as an abandoned vehicle investigation, with suspicious circumstances requiring additional forensic analysis, a way to officially document that something had happened without having to explain exactly what that something was until they had more information and evidence that wouldn't make them seem completely insane. The Bodycam footage was transferred to the department's archives the following morning, marked as evidence in an open investigation. Chen underwent a standard psychological evaluation, something the department required whenever an officer discharged their weapon or reported a traumatic incident. And surprisingly, he passed all tests with no indications of delusion or mental instability. The psychologist who evaluated him noted in his report that Chen seemed genuinely traumatized by something he had experienced, but that his responses were consistent and rational, showing no signs of psychosis or disconnection from reality. The blood samples collected at the scene were sent for forensic analysis, and the results that came back 3 weeks later were so bizarre that the lab asked to redo the tests 2 additional times, thinking contamination had occurred. The DNA in the blood didn't match any known species in the database, showing markers the technician described as partially human, but with sequences that didn't make biological sense, as if they were a genetic impossibility that shouldn't be able to exist. The pink pickup truck was towed to the department's impound lot, where it remained sealed by order of investigators who began taking interest in the case after rumors about the recording started circulating among neighboring departments. Sarah Whitehorse, the registered owner of the vehicle, had been declared a missing person 6 months before the incident on Route 491, her family having reported that she had left home one night after increasingly erratic behaviors and never returned. When investigators interviewed her relatives, they discovered disturbing stories about Sarah claiming to see things others didn't see, about her beginning to speak in ancient languages she shouldn't know, about her disappearing for days and returning with torn clothes and stains that could have been blood, but that she refused to explain. Sarah's grandmother, when she finally agreed to speak with authorities, said in a low voice that she believed her granddaughter had been taken by something, that she had walked in places where humans shouldn't walk and had brought something back with her, something that eventually consumed who she used to be. The Bodycam footage leaked to the internet approximately 2 months after the incident, probably through someone inside the department itself who had access to the digital files. The video spread with viral speed, accumulating millions of views in just a few days, with people fiercely debating whether it was real or an elaborate hoax. Visual effects experts analyzed every frame, and most concluded that if it was fake, it was the most convincing and technically perfect fake ever created, because there were no signs of digital manipulation, no inconsistencies in lighting, none of the typical CGI markers that would normally be detectable. Navajo folklore experts were interviewed by news programs and podcasts, and many of them refused to comment specifically about the video, but some of the elders said that what was shown in the recording was consistent with traditional descriptions of Yinald Lushi, the skinwalkers, witches who had broken the most sacred taboos and gained the power to assume animal forms through forbidden rituals. Chen involuntarily became famous, his identity eventually being discovered despite the department's efforts to keep it confidential. He gave only one official interview for a documentary about unexplained phenomena, and in that interview, he made it clear that he didn't care if people believed him or not, that he knew what he had seen and experienced that night on Route 491, and that experience had fundamentally changed his understanding of what was possible or impossible in this world. He mentioned the light from the sky, something many video commentators had focused on, and when asked if he thought there was any connection between that light and the creatures that attacked him, Chen said he had the impression that the light wasn't there to save him specifically, but that perhaps it was monitoring or controlling those things, that perhaps there were layers of reality operating on that road that humans normally can't perceive. Route 491 gained even more notoriety after the incident, with paranormal phenomenon hunters traveling from all over the country to visit the exact location where everything happened. The local police department increased patrols in the area, partly for legitimate safety concerns, but also because more people began reporting strange experiences on that specific stretch of road. There were reports of lights in the sky similar to what Chen had seen, of strange figures watching drivers from a distance, of inexplicable sounds coming from the surrounding desert. Marcus Begay, the Navajo officer who had helped Chen that night, eventually left the department and became a consultant on cultural matters for investigations involving tribal lands, and in rare interviews, he always emphasized that there were things on those lands that the Navajo people had known for generations, things that modern society preferred to ignore or ridicule, but that were absolutely real to those who grew up hearing the stories and respecting the warnings. The case was never officially closed. The pickup truck remains in custody. The blood samples with impossible DNA are archived, the photographs with witchcraft symbols were cataloged but never fully explained. Chen still works as a patrolman, but he admitted in private conversations that he never drove Route 491 again after nightfall, that there are some places where even an armed and trained man shouldn't venture alone when darkness falls. The body cam that captured all of that continues being analyzed by researchers, each frame being examined for additional details. And the more people study that recording, the more questions arise without answers. What were those creatures really? Were they the skinwalkers of Navajo legends, witches transformed into something no longer human? Or were they something even stranger, something the ancient legends tried to describe with the only words and concepts available in their time? And that light in the sky, that object that seemed to make the creatures retreat in fear, what was that, and why did it appear exactly at that moment? Chen sometimes wonders if he was really saved that night, or if he was simply allowed to survive for reasons he'll never fully understand. If his survival was part of some larger plan or experiment being conducted on those empty roads where civilization ends, and something much more ancient and incomprehensible begins.